Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Grab some watercolors and some paper and let's paint this galaxy wolf.
Okay, let's start with the watercolor paper. So today I'm going to use this Fabriano 100% cotton cold pressed watercolor paper. It's 300 GSM or 140 pounds. It has a nice tooth to it. Normally I use this one, the Arches 140 pound cold pressed paper. This is my favorite paper to use. The reason being is that it holds a ton of water. You can do a lot of layers and the paper still has some buckling, but it's pretty minimal compared to other brands that I've tried. So I want to compare them, and so this time I'm going to use this one and see how it goes. I have this traceable outline for you. I'll link it in the description below if you want to use this to trace onto your paper rather than freehand drawing your wolf, but you can do whatever makes you happy. So this is a 9 by 12 inch pad of paper, but this will easily fit onto an 8 by 10 as well. This is just all I have, so this is what I'm going to use, okay? I'm going to start by taping it down where I want it. And then I'm going to place my graphite paper that I've used lots of times before, as you can tell, underneath. And then just start tracing. I'm not pressing too hard because I don't want to dent or emboss the paper, but I'm pressing, just hard enough to be able to make it transfer. Okay. That looks pretty good. Now let's talk about paint. So I'm going to use a variety of blues and black. Where's my black? You can use whatever you have on hand. Where is my, is it in here already? Ah! I know I have a lamp. Oh, here it is. Okay, so I'm going to use lamp black, phthalo turquoise, Windsor blue, indigo, ultramarine, alizarin crimson, maybe some hooker's green. I haven't decided yet. These are all the Winsor and Newton professional watercolors, but you can use Cotman or you can use any brand that you have that you feel comfortable with. You don't need really expensive watercolors for this. So I'm just going to have some fun. So I'm going to use a variety of brushes. You don't have to have the same brushes, just have a big one, a medium one, and a smaller one, maybe even a little smaller. It's whatever you feel comfortable with. Again, we're just having fun, okay? Got my paper towels and some water on hand as well. Okay, so I'm going to take this big one and just get some clean water with no paint on it, or no paint in it, and just wet. Ah, that looks a little bit pink. No. Let me rinse my brush really well. Let's try this again. Okay, so we're going to wet the inside of our wolf here, trying not to go outside of the outline. So we don't want a big puddle of water, we just want the entire inside to be nice and glossy with water, so that when we drop in our paint, it blooms nicely. I know for a lot of watercolor artists, they don't like blooms, But in this case, when we're painting a galaxy, this is actually a look I want. If you prefer to not let your paint bloom, that's fine. It's your choice. It's your art. You're the artist. Just don't use as much water, or maybe even skip this wetting part altogether. So the first thing I'm going to do is just take a little of my phthalo blue here, nice and watered down, and just drop it in somewhere towards the middle. See how it's blooming? That's the look I was going for. Always remember that your paint is going to dry lighter than how it looks when you're dropping it in when it's wet. Okay, and then I'm going to take some of my ultramarine while everything is still wet and do the same thing, but do it more towards the outer part, not so much inside. And I am encouraging the two colors to mix. Ah, I splashed. It's pretty easy to wipe off paint splatters if you do it while it's still wet. It's pretty impossible to do it once you let it dry. I don't know why it's splashing so much. I think because the brush is so big. So I'm pulling it in some of the areas here. Again, remember it's going to dry pretty light. We'll have to do a few layers. I already feel the paper buckling somewhat, but I am using a lot of water, and the same thing happens with the arches. Let's see, I'm going to take some of the Windsor blue. This keeps splashing. I think I'm going to get a smaller brush. Use this one. So I'm concentrating the darker, deeper values towards the outside of the wolf. Dragging some of it in like this. But for the most part, I'm going to have the dark colors towards the outline. That's a little too much water. See how light that phthalo is getting? We're definitely going to have to put some more layers. I think I do want to incorporate a little pink in there. So I'm going to get a little bit of alizarin crimson and just kind of drop it in while it's still wet. And of course that's going to make it more purple. which is fine. I don't think I'm going to use any green though. Okay, so I'm going to let this dry and I'll come back when it's all dry. Okay, so I got really impatient and I don't know if you can hear my dog, but he's whining. I got really impatient and went ahead and used the hair dryer to dry it. So this is completely dry. I'm going to take some clean water and drop it in, not as much as before. You don't need as much water, but I am going to drop in a little bit of water here. And then I'm going to grab some more phthalo blue and place it there. And focusing more towards the middle. I'm going to do a little bit towards the outside too. Honestly, just have fun. It doesn't matter. It's whatever is appealing to you. That's what makes these paintings so fun. They're different every time, and you really just do what makes you happy. And if you don't want any harsh lines like this is going to dry harsh. I just incorporate a little bit of water and blend it out. That's all. But if you do want some lines there, that's okay too. You're the artist. I am blending it out because I do like the lines between the colors, or between the layers, to be softer. But there'll be a few that aren't, and that's okay. Okay, now I'm going to take some indigo and start concentrating that more around the outside, the border of the wolf, while my painting is still wet. If it ends up drying on you, it's okay. Just grab some more water like I did and blend it out. And I'm going to blend it towards the middle, towards the lighter areas, without completely covering them up. Making a little bit of fur detail here on the outside with the tip of my brush. So I'm going to take a little bit more of the blue. I think it's which blue is this? The Windsor blue. It's really, really similar to ultramarine. I don't even know if I can really tell the difference. Maybe the ultramarine has slightly more red in it. Anyway, I'm going to take a little bit more and just drop it here and there, wherever I feel like. I kind of like to accent or create more contrast in the nose and the ears and more towards the outline of the wolf. Okay. My painting's still wet, which is why it's still spreading and blooming the way it is. Not super wet, but enough where I'm getting the effect that I was going for. So here it's a little bit drier, so I'm just going to add some water and blend it out. Being careful not to go outside of my outline because then it'll spread out where I don't want it. Okay, now I'm going to grab some of the lamp black. Again, these areas are still wet, so I'm just going to go ahead and grab some of my paintbrush here and touch the areas, especially where we just talked about, the nose and the mouth. I really like darkening these areas because it really helps kind of define the wolf. Almost like creating this outline. I don't want to go too much into my lighter areas, but I will kind of touch on them a little. I really like this blue here. I'm going to try not to cover that up with black. Also with the black, I'm trying to cover up my pencil lines because they're still visible, or the lines from the graphite paper. They're still visible. I'm trying to cover them up a little bit as well. Okay, so let's see. I think I really like that Windsor blue. I'm going to put in just a little bit more on the other side here. Blend it out. Maybe some here. Yeah. I think that's pretty. Okay, so now I'm going to take the hairdryer to it again and get to the next step. So as you can see, there are some harsh lines left here after it dried, which I'm not too crazy about. So I'm going to take a damp brush and just see if I can soften them out just a little bit, or at least just blend them a little. It's not really going to help a whole lot, but it might look a little bit better. But that's okay. This is how we learn, right? Okay. I think I want to darken the ear and the snout a little bit. So I'm going to add some more of that lamp black. And just blend it out a little bit here where it's a little damp. I'm going to grab a tiny bit of water and blend it out. Dropping in some more blue. I don't want to completely cover up this pink, so I'm going to lightly brush in some blue here and then bring some more pink back in. Kind of like the way that looks. Okay, so again, I'm going to let that dry. Okay, so now we're going to make some stars. For that, I've got this old, kind of splayed out, really beat up old paintbrush. It's pretty stiff. And I'm going to use some white gouache, but you can use acrylic or ink if that's what you have. I'm going to put it on my palette and mix in just enough water to make it not so stiff, to make it just a little bit watery. We're going to use clean water so we don't tint our gouache. And I've got my, okay, the brush is pretty loaded and the gouache is not so stiff anymore. It's got a little bit of water in it, so we'll test it out here. And then we just start to spray. flicking it on. Let's see. I'm going to add a little more water and a little more paint to see if maybe I can get some of those drops to be a little bit bigger without hopefully ruining it. Do a little of this. And this. And I'm focusing the stream of white mostly in the middle here. Okay. And I'll do a little here, a little here. Okay, now I'm going to let that dry. Okay, now that the gouache is dry, I'm going to, well, sort of dry. I'm going to put in some bigger stars using this Posca pen. You can use more gouache if you want on a paintbrush or ink or whatever you like. Acrylic white paint would even work. I'm just going to make a few bigger stars here and there. Okay, then I want to make my moon. I'm just going to make a little crescent moon. You can make a full moon if that's what you prefer. I'm going to use, I have a cap to my spray bottle. I'm going to use the cap to outline. I'm going to put it here, whoops. I'm going to put it here. You can see the paper is really buckling, which happens with the Arches paper too, but if you let it sit overnight with the, once it's dry, cover it up with the cover and let it sit overnight, even between some books, it flattens out a little bit, almost completely. Okay, let's see, maybe right there. So then I just trace a little crescent here. Oops. Okay. So now I have to figure out where I want my trees. I thought about maybe doing a scene like a landscape where there's maybe some distant mountains in the back and some trees in the foreground. It's really up to you, whatever you feel like painting. The possibilities are endless. But what I think I kind of want to do is paint a scene that has the view from the ground up, so that you're standing in between the trees. So instead the trees are kind of coming out this way, so it's like your vanishing point is up here, close to where the moon is. I'm not quite sure if I can achieve that, but I'm gonna try. So I'm just gonna get some more lamp black on a smaller brush here and start kind of mapping in where I want my trees to come from. So this is dry. This is wet on dry paper, okay? It's completely dry. Okay. Maybe do a shorter tree here. Another one here. Maybe a taller one here. here. Let's see. Let's do maybe some smaller ones in between here. Just wherever you feel like. So I think that's good for now. I might end up adding more in a little bit. So now I'm going to get quite a bit of paint on my brush here. I don't know if you can see that. Can you see that? Yeah. And I'm just going to start, we'll start with this little one. Just start dabbing without completely covering up the top. Just start dabbing and working our way down and making it a little lighter as we go down. Adding some little variations here and there, leaving some of the background poking through. Just like that. Real pine trees are not super symmetrical or perfect like a lot of Christmas trees are. They have some scraggly branches and some uneven areas, so don't be afraid to play. Okay, and we're just going to keep doing that with all these tree trunks and trying to vary them a little bit. You can leave some little bald areas on the trunk if you'd like. Not all trees are full. You can even make little indications of little areas of the tree that branch out without actually drawing them in precisely, just by dabbing. This reminds me of watching Bob Ross paint when I was a kid, and he would do the trees, the pine trees. Really similar to what he did with oil paints, but we're doing it with watercolors. If you want some of the trees to appear further away, then add a little bit more water, because the lighter they are, the further away they are from the viewer. At least they'll appear to be further away if you make them a little lighter. The darker, more contrasty trees will appear a little closer. Just remember, your paint is going to dry a lot lighter than what you're putting on. So you may have to go back and darken some areas, depending on how you want it to look. See, this one's getting a little too light for me, and I wanted it to appear closer than the one next to it, so I'm going to darken it up a little. So just keep doing that, going all the way around for each tree trunk that we painted in. And if you feel like that's not enough trees and you want to add more, go for it. Or if you want to add some bushes, go for it. Kind of like that. I think so. The last thing I'm going to do is go around and darken some of these areas around the border of the wolf just to define them a little bit more. You don't have to. You do end up covering some of your stars when you do that, so just be aware. Actually, I think I'm going to leave it, because then we run into the trouble of trying to blend it into the sky, and I don't really want those harsh lines. So I'm just going to leave it. It's okay. All right. Now let it dry. I think I'm going to reinforce the moon a little bit with some of the white gouache. Okay, so I'll come back when it's dry.
So here's the finished painting. The only thing left to do is sign it with an ink pen. I'm going to use one of these Staedtler ink pens in the size 0.3. I really hope you guys try this painting. It was a lot of fun to do, and thank you again so much for watching. I'll see you guys next time.